Also go distance.
There's no distance. I can't go distance. No, we said it's a race.
Maddie's been actually training to run a marathon. So I think she was talking about it. And I think David, in his true fashion, is like, well, I could run a marathon. He's charming, but he definitely has an ego.
But he's going to pull a hamstring. You're an endurance race.
Okay.
I'm like a cheetah.
Do you think this is like Maddie challenging you? Do you think this is like a rite of passage?
I don't know if it's a rite of passage.
Hi, besties. In this latest episode, there were several moments where the tension between Janelle and Christine was pretty noticeable. Now, some might chalk it up to grief, but honestly, I think this kind of friction has been simmering in their relationship for decades. Janelle has always had a very particular way of doing things. She's more reserved, quieter, and definitely more of an introvert. Over the years, she has often admitted that Christine's loud, bubbly, and over-the-top personality embarrassed her at times. She's even described Christine as being a princess, or a bit of a diva. Christine, on the other hand, hasn't exactly held back either. She said Janelle can be bossy, and in her book she actually shared stories that highlight the imbalance she felt in their relationship. For example, while Janelle was busy working, Christine felt like there was this unspoken expectation that she had to take care of all the kids, Janelle's included. And when Janelle came home, she wasn't jumping in to lighten Christine's load. That wasn't something they ever truly agreed on, and Christine carried a lot of resentment over it. In the book, Christine also wrote about why she didn't want to move to Coyote Pass or live in one big family house again. For her, it wasn't just about avoiding Mary, it was also about not wanting to fall back into that same dynamic with Janelle. She worried that if Janelle got an idea for some new project like starting a garden, it would eventually fall on Christine to maintain it. Christine always felt like she was the one stuck carrying out Janelle's ideas. Christine also became really sensitive about being labeled a princess. I mean, why was that title always being thrown at her? That label carried a sting. And honestly, the history between the two of them has always been complicated. Their kids grew up together, and that bond was what kept Christine and Janelle somewhat connected for years. Later, when things in their marriages with Cody fell apart, they found common ground in their unhappiness. That mutual frustration brought them closer, and eventually they both chose to leave. Now Christine has remarried, and Janelle is still figuring things out for herself. What hasn't changed, though, is Janelle's communication style. She rarely says things directly to Christine's face. Instead, she makes little comments in her interviews, those talking head moments, that come across as passive-aggressive. Christine, for her part, reacts in her own way too. Whether it's insecurity, or just that deep-seated tension that's been there for years, she sometimes responds with her own digs. In interviews, both Christine and Janelle have admitted that keeping their friendship intact hasn't been easy. They've had to put in a lot of work because the reality is they share a long history, and history is hard to set aside. It's easy to take things personally when producers ask pointed questions, and it often stirs up old wounds. A good example from this episode was Christine's reaction to Janelle's new property in North Carolina. Christine seemed a little jealous, almost dismissive, like she was downplaying its importance. And Janelle picked up on it, firing back with her own subtle digs. But honestly, it all kicked off at the very start of the episode when Janelle made a comment about David. Check this out. When the conversation came up, David, in true David fashion, immediately chimed in with, "Well, I could run a marathon." That's just who he is. He's charming, but at the same time, he definitely carries a bit of an ego. And it reminded me of Cody in a way, because Cody always had this larger-than-life personality and this commanding presence. Janelle kind of compared David to that, saying he's the same, he's got that big personality. But then she layered it with another word, bluster. She painted him as someone who's full of bravado, always like, "I can do it. I can do it better. I can outdo you." Almost as if he's that guy, the one who always needs to prove himself. Now, do I think David's confident? Absolutely. And yes, so is Cody, overly confident even. But the way Janelle worded it made it sound like she was trying to put David in the same box. I've always been someone who prefers confidence in a partner, so I get why Christine might be attracted to that quality. Of course, in this specific case, they were talking about a race, which makes sense. Maybe Janelle was just trying to explain why David would even want to challenge Maddie in the first place. Realistically, it's TV. They needed content, and this gave them a light-hearted, entertaining moment. But here's the thing. I've noticed David's personality goes deeper than that. He comes across as playful, especially around kids. Competing, joking, doing silly challenges. That seems to be his way of bonding and connecting. So when Janelle said he has an ego, I couldn't help but pause. Because when she framed it as, he's charming but he has an ego, it wasn't just a compliment, it came with a sting. It's one of those backhanded remarks where you start sweet but then tack on a but. She went even further, saying he's full of bluster. Which, let's be honest, sounds like another way of saying he's cocky. That's what she was really implying, that he's all puffed up confidence. And then she lumped him in with Cody again, emphasizing the big personality comparison. To me, it just felt like such a strange way to describe David. Sure, in the context of a playful race, maybe. But beyond that, I've seen much more to David than just a so-called blustery personality. In fact, I had to actually look up what blustery really means. And you know what? It's not exactly flattering. According to the definition, it describes someone as aggressive, boastful, or threatening, someone who uses a lot of tough talk without real authority. It implies that a person is basically all bark, no bite. So if we break it down, Janelle essentially said two things about David. One, that he has an ego, and two, that his confidence is just empty noise meant to cover up weakness. That paints him as having false bravado, fake courage, arrogance, swagger, even a kind of bullying edge, but without real effectiveness behind it. The word bluster itself really stood out to me. It's a term that dismisses someone as weak, foolish, or unimpressive, even if they come across aggressively. Honestly, it's not a word I personally use. I've never described anyone as blustery. If anything, I'd probably just say cocky. That feels more natural. But even then, I didn't get the sense at all that David was acting blustery in that interaction. And here's the bigger issue. I don't like how Janelle compared David to Cody. To me, that feels unfair, even insulting. Because here's the difference. Cody has a mean streak. David doesn't. David actually comes across as deeply sensitive, especially toward Christine. He's tuned into her emotions and what she's been through. Think about how he described their first year of marriage. He openly admitted it was incredibly hard for them, especially after Garrison's death. That loss shook the whole family, and David was thrown right into the middle of it. He barely knew Garrison, and yet, suddenly he was navigating grief, pain, and overwhelming emotions that weren't even his own but belonged to the woman he had just married and her family. Instead of shutting down or running away, he leaned in and tried to support Christine through something unimaginably difficult. That's not bluster, that's compassion. On screen, he actually comes across as funny, lighthearted, and engaging. He feels warmer, more affectionate than Cody ever did. So when Christine gets asked about Janelle's comparison, you can see she almost stumbles, caught off guard. She'll say something like, "Well, yeah, I guess I do like confident men," but then she quickly separates the two, making it clear she doesn't see David and Cody as having the same personality at all. Because they don't. Cody radiates arrogance, cocky, self-centered, completely full of himself. David's energy is different. He's confident too, but in a way that feels playful and approachable rather than overbearing. And yet, this is exactly how Janelle operates. She'll phrase something as though it's a compliment, but then she tacks on a but, drops in some obscure or intellectual word, like bluster. And suddenly the whole statement is an insult wrapped in polite packaging. It sounds harmless on the surface, but it's actually cutting underneath. This, to me, is a huge part of why the family has struggled so much with communication. It's this indirect, backhanded style. Say something nice, then slip in a little jab. That tension builds and builds because things aren't said openly, they're said sideways. And later, when they're all out at the property, we see Christine firing off her own jabs right back at Janelle. Janelle is talking about how she dreams of this place becoming a gathering spot for the entire family. And Christine, with a smile, basically says, "Well, I want my house to be the place where everyone gathers too." Then she jokes about it being like a friendly gang war between her and Janelle, who can draw more people in. And she admits, right now Janelle's winning. Christine also shrugs off the North Carolina land, pointing out that it's just raw property with nothing on it, nothing she finds appealing. And honestly, I kind of see where she's coming from. Because here's the thing. Janelle has never really been the glue in this family. She's never been the one to pull everyone together in the past. So when she suddenly talks about creating Tata Farms as this future family hub, it feels a little off-brand for her. That role of family gatherer has always been Christine's thing. So in a way, I think Christine feels like her territory is being stepped on. At the same time, she's not naive. She knows exactly what this North Carolina property is. Raw, undeveloped land. Land like that takes years to turn into anything livable. There's no infrastructure yet, and before you can even think about houses or gatherings, acres and acres have to be cleared. That process is slow and expensive. Then comes infrastructure, roads, utilities, water systems, and of course you have to get permits from the county. And anyone who has ever dealt with local government in the South knows. Nothing moves fast there. For context, they bought this land back in the spring of 2024. And only last month did they finally get permits just to break ground on their house. Not the farm buildings, not the community spaces, just the house. No actual farm work has even started yet. Christine sees all this and calls it for what it is. A dream that's still years away. Janelle, though, sees possibility and potential. Now, to be fair, maybe the project will actually move forward, but if it does, it'll likely be because Maddie is involved. Maddie is hands-on and practical. With Janelle, the track record is a little shakier. She's always admitted she's an idea person. She's got a million plans, but she relies on other people to actually carry them out. So when Christine pointed out that this property would require a ton of work, Janelle found that comment insulting. Christine, on the other hand, is very clear about what she wants. She's not a homesteader. She doesn't have the desire to spend her days building fences, raising livestock, or digging irrigation trenches. What she wants is to live in a comfortable home in the suburbs, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Most people in this country want exactly that. A nice, cozy house in a neighborhood with all the amenities nearby. That doesn't make her lesser than. But then comes Janelle's subtle jab. She frames Christine as this prissy, suburban woman who just wants comfort, as if that's a flaw. And it struck me because she also added, Christine isn't a homesteader. Well, let's be honest here. Neither is Janelle. She's never been. Think about her life history. Janelle grew up in the city. She went to college in the city. When the family lived in Wyoming, yes, they were technically on a farm, but it wasn't true homesteading. They lived in a trailer on a ranch, but they weren't producing their own food or building everything from scratch. When she moved out, she bought a house. Again, not homesteading. Then the family was in Lehigh, suburban life. Then in Las Vegas, pure city living. Then in Flagstaff, again no homesteading. And when she finally moved out to Coyote Pass, she decided to live in an RV. But she completely underestimated how hard that life would actually be. She didn't think through the fact that there was no water line, no utilities, no real setup for long-term living. She romanticized the idea of it being this blissful adventure, but reality hit fast. She only lasted a couple of months before packing it up and moving into a comfortable apartment in town. Even now, while she talks about homesteading dreams, the reality is she lives with Caleb and Maddie in a suburban home in a small city. That's not off-grid, sustainable living. That's regular neighborhood life. So yes, the North Carolina property may technically be called a homestead, but let's be clear. It's not the kind of homestead people imagine when they hear that word. It's not a remote, self-sufficient lifestyle where they'll produce all their own food, raise their own animals, make their own clothes, and live entirely off the land. At best, it'll be a big property with a nice house and maybe some gardens. And there's nothing wrong with that either. But it's not true homesteading, no matter how Janelle spins it. I mean, if we're talking about real homesteading, you'd probably have to head deep into parts of Alaska to see that kind of lifestyle. Or maybe in certain pockets of the West where people still live off the land on large ranches. But North Carolina? Let's be real, it's not exactly roughing it. Sure, it'll take time to get everything set up and established, but it's not that rugged lifestyle people imagine. What makes it even more strange is how, even within the show, the wives are constantly being asked to compare themselves. And the thing is, they don't really know how to not compete. It's almost ingrained in their dynamic. It's been a part of their lives for decades. Christine, though, has really accomplished a lot over the past several years. She and David built a house. Together they've bought 3 vacation rentals that now provide a solid stream of passive income. She wrote a book that went on to become a New York Times bestseller. On top of that, she's managed to create stability for her daughter. And she even took Cody to court for child support, and won. Janelle, on the other hand, talked about suing Cody, talked about going to court, but never followed through. The whole process of dividing assets dragged out much longer than it should have. And that right there highlights the odd dynamic between them. Christine takes action, while Janelle often talks about action but doesn't always follow through. That's why in this episode the tension felt so obvious. I saw more of Janelle subtly insulting David, throwing little digs at him and at his relationship with Christine. Christine in turn seemed a bit sensitive to those comments. And then Janelle suddenly wanting to position herself as the person who creates this new gathering place for the family. It just feels off because that's never been her role before. So if I try to put myself in Christine's shoes, I can understand why she feels the way she does. For years, Christine was the one who hosted, who gathered everyone, who kept that sense of family alive. And now it seems like Janelle is stepping into that space, almost trying to take over a role that Christine has worked hard to fill. Naturally, Christine probably feels like her territory is being encroached on. But here's the reality. In a family this big, there will never be just one central gathering spot. They're not even functioning as one family anymore. They've branched off into multiple families with different homes, different lives, and even different states. So no matter how much they dream, there's never going to be one single family hub. If Janelle, Maddie, and Caleb are committed to North Carolina, then that's where their gatherings will be. And Christine and David are clearly settled in Utah, building their life there. So naturally, different groups will gather in different places. It's unavoidable. And yet, the show still tries to frame these overlapping dynamics as conflict. To me, it feels a little forced, a little boring even, but at the same time, it does add layers to the storyline. It's fun to see them dream big. It's nice to see Janelle finally have visions and goals of her own outside of Cody. But no matter how much positive spin is put on it, the underlying friction between Christine and Janelle is still there. You can't ignore it. And that's why I've said before, I don't actually think they're best friends. Honestly, I don't even think they're true friends in the traditional sense. To me, they still act more like sister wives. And if you've ever had a sibling, you know exactly what I mean. You love them, but you don't always like them. That's the best way to describe Christine and Janelle's relationship. They're like sisters who grew up competing for their parents' attention. Except in their case, it was decades of competing for Cody's attention. That competitive energy doesn't just go away. It's shifted now. It's no longer about being wives, but it's become its own kind of sister rivalry. So I don't know if you caught the same conflict I did, but it was there. And honestly, I just hope Janelle is able to find her peace and her happiness after such a tough year. Whether her comments about David came from grief or just old patterns, I hope she's able to move forward. Because at the end of the day, no, I don't think David is blustery. That's just not who I see him as. But that's my take. So what do you think? Did you notice the tension too? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear them. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, hit subscribe if you haven't already, and click the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thanks so much for watching, besties. Bye for now.